I'm Alfonso Mendoza, host of the My Ed Tech Life podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm focused on creativity and coding with Scratch and ScratchFoundation.org. Francisco Cervantes is the Director of Creative Learning of the Scratch Foundation, and you are going to learn some really cool stuff about coding. Thanks for listening, and by the way, before you go, it would be so cool if you would share this episode with your friends, your family, your colleagues, your neighbors, everybody. Could you do that for me? That would be so awesome. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining in. Enjoy the show.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Miletto. Teaching, learning, leading K12. Teaching, learning, leading K12. Teaching, learning, leading K12. With Dr. Steve Miletto.
Francisco Cervantes has extensive experience researching, designing, and implementing educational resources in K-12 computer science. Before joining the Scratch Foundation, Francisco served as the director of high school, middle school computer science academics for New York City Department of Education's CSforAll team, and earlier as a researcher with EDC's Center for Children and Technology. Francisco worked closely with Scratch Ed's creative computing curriculum guide while in these roles, where he investigated how teachers designed learning experiences in computing education. He later worked with rural and tribal schools in Minnesota to build K-12 CS programs that support underrepresented students in computing. Francisco is a California native and holds an MA in Educational Leadership, Politics, and Advocacy from New York University and a BS in Electrical Engineering from the University of California, Santa Barbara. His research interests include the development of computational fluency in young learners and the use of formal assessments in design-based learning environments. In his spare time, Francisco enjoys skateboarding and playing soccer. A note about Scratch. Scratch has become the world's largest coding community for kids. In the past year alone, more than 200 million children interacted with Scratch. Francisco, thanks for joining me today, and say hi to everyone.
Hello. Thanks for having me today. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, it's exciting to have you here, and I appreciate you joining me. And before we go any further, I got a couple things I got to ask you about. And number one thing I got to ask you is, so you're a skateboarder, huh?
I grew up skateboarding in San Diego. It's a year-round sport in San Diego. And so I just loved kind of the different places where it took me. I think one of the fun things about skateboarding is that you eventually walk by later on by a staircase or a wall, and you realize, oh, I could jump that. Nice. Or like, oh, that would be perfect to do a trick. So you kind of develop this lens for skateboarding. And I think, to me, I equate it with like a lens for computing. You look at a stoplight and you're like, oh, I wonder how that will look like. Or I grew up with Chevy Impalas on the West Coast. So it's like, oh, the lights on the tail lights of Impala, how are they programmed to do that? You know, they have back in the day, they kind of turn on and sequence and stuff. And so, yeah, I think it's similar to developing a lens for computing and developing a lens in skateboarding.
That's cool that you went there, because that's what I was kind of thinking about, was that I had my time with skateboarding. I would never call me a skateboarder. I would call more like a skate faller or something like that. I mean, it's
you'd have to learn how to fall, right? In skateboarding, you can't just fall face first, and you can't just stick your hands out, because then you just grind. You have to kind of roll with it. And I think similarly with computing, you have to learn how to fail. You have to learn how to come back from it, and it's not about, you're not going to break Scratch, but you always don't want when you fail your program to fail to break everything around it or hurt you if it's a robot.
Yeah, that's nice. This is cool, because you're going in cool directions that I'm going to love this talk. So, before we go any further, because you got all this stuff in your background. You're an electrical engineer. You got all this stuff that deals with technology and things. Yeah, where'd all that interest come from? Where'd your interest in computers and technology come from? I mean, why did Francisco say, I like doing this?
A lot of, I think, my family, my grandpa had a factory in Mexico City. My dad is an electrical engineer. My mom is a teacher and principal, is a combination of the two. But I previously also worked as a researcher with the MIT Media Lab Group and Mitch Resnick. Karen Brennan was a PhD student at the time, now at Harvard's Graduate School of Education. And that was my first introduction to the Scratch team. And so I wanted to have more of an active role and contribute to the field from a leadership point of view. And so that's kind of grown since then. And so but initially I began designing, implementing programs and working closely with teachers. And so I think it was kind of like one of the ways I can pinpoint it is that I used to coordinate large outreach programs in Santa Barbara, reaching out to local community and kids and inviting them to join kind of STEM spaces. And then in that space, I just realizing, oh, what is this curriculum? What is education? What is this goes beyond that? And I developed a presentation on the math and science behind hip hop music. And at that point, I was like, oh, like math and science topics can be taught from any point of view. And it's not just the topic, it's how you do it. And so I think that has grown into my love for Scratch and not just the product, but how it's used and how we support educators in their practice.
This is cool. And just as a note, man, one of the things we're going to get into in a minute is talking about creativity and stuff like this. And I think you're fitting right in the right place because there's a lot of cool stuff happening there. That's awesome. So you're the director of creative learning for the Scratch Foundation. I mean, could you tell us what the Scratch Foundation is and what you do as the director of creative learning?
Yeah. So the Scratch group and the Scratch team came out of a lifelong kindergartner group and MIT Media Lab. And recently we moved into our own foundation, our own space, our organizational structure. And part of that is because Scratch has grown tremendously. Like in the past year alone, more than 200 million children interacted with Scratch. And so Scratch was initially developed by the MIT's LLK group, and so now the LLK is focused on developing new way for creative learning to occur, and then really they've passed this great mission of Scratch and products to our foundation to grow those creative learning ideas and further engage with students. And so that could sometimes means traveling around the world and seeing how Scratch is used in pockets of the world. It could also mean having really intense conversations about what we're observing and learning and how we're supporting that. And so part of my team with the creative learning is to think about how we're engaging our online community through our studios and special events, and then how do we support our community of practice, whether it be a Scratch conference, implementing a Scratch day, a workshop, and what can we learn from that? How it can further provide more opportunities in either creating a learning resource, a guide, and such. And so that's a lot of my creative learning team does, is really not thinking about just what the tool is, but how it's used in its different settings.
That's cool. And something you've talked about that I want to make sure that I get to is that we're skirting around the issue, but we've mentioned that word creativity and coding several times here. And coding and creativity are sometimes viewed as two very separate pursuits, as different as the left brain and right brain. What's Scratch's philosophy to creative coding?
Yeah, I think Scratch brings awareness to its global access to creative coding through partnerships with communities that work with children. And I think a lot of that work is working with marginalized communities and having equal access and opportunity to learn creative coding. And so with Scratch, the online editor, you don't need any background in computing. You can begin tinkering, exploring, experimenting with a project based off of your own passion, your own ideas, something that you want to share with friends and your peers. And so that's a lot of the what Scratch can provide is kind of an opportunity to learn something about new in whether it be coding, whether it be art, but also hopefully learn something about yourself in that process. And that I think can only be, or a lot of times we feel the best way to do that is when you're making around things that you want to do, right? And so sometimes, and I've worked with kids in the past and young people, and if it's not fun and it does involve other people, they probably don't want to do it, right? And so how do we build off those ideas and passions? And I think Scratch is a great medium, a form of expression. It's for a tool that you can connect with somebody else around the world and and share something that's really meaningful to you. And I think not just stop there, but like them passing it back to you, growing from there, riffing off of it, remixing it, building those ideas. And I think that's really the value of what Scratch brings to the creative coding community.
Very cool. So I got to say something here. I mean, like when I was in high school, we'll not talk about when that was, but that was a while ago. And, there was this class that I took that was run by this math teacher, and I learned a very, very important thing. It was called if, then, go to statements. And, if you wanted extra credit, you stayed after school and you went to these magazines that the teacher brought, and you start putting all this stuff into the computer, and eventually you get these games out of it. I also learned a very important thing, that it doesn't exist if you don't push save. And, but with that being said, when we talk about creativity, a lot of times, what is it that we're really talking about here? I mean, because in those cases, all I was doing was I was copying somebody else's work and I put it in, and that was not exciting. And it did not ask me to do anything except stay awake and copy it exactly like you saw it, right? So why is that so important, the creativity? What are we talking about here?
But for creativity for us is it can be in multiple ways. I think in multiple different contexts, right? There's creativity in skateboarding is one thing, right? I think for us, creativity with coding and is what we kind of see as creative expression. How do you express yourself through tools? And so Scratch enables students to create projects that express their idea. And part of that is going beyond those technical skills, but really how to learn how to use your coding to bring your ideas to life. And so I think part of that is like, I have an idea, I have something, maybe it's not fully thought of, but how can I begin building on that and exploring that? And I think that's where creative coding and creative expression comes in, is that I can then try it out and realize, oh, that's not really what I wanted to do, but I learned that this is a challenge right here. This is more valuable. And so I believe so that leads into the power of like, I can create. And I think that's probably one of the first pieces of creativity, right? Is as I can use this medium for creating something, and that thing that I create is something that I'm passionate about. That is being creative. I think creativity also means connecting with others and realizing like, oh, like I can build off your ideas and create more out of those. Be creative in how I bring those. I can give you credit, give you a shout out, send you some love for pushing us to continue to reuse and remix our ideas. And I think that another piece of that is also being able to deepen your understanding of ideas across a curriculum. And so maybe I'm studying math or language arts or history or science, and now I can explore what that topic is and be creative. And so an example is I see a lot of water cycles on projects, and so sometimes Scratch is attached to a water cycle, and kids can then create a demonstration of what a diorama of a water cycle is. And so, but I saw another student the other day, a young person, talk about the water cycle from a water's perspective, right? And so what would the water say to the cloud as it's falling? What would that look like? And I think that's what Scratch allows you to do is not just go with perhaps that same diorama, but think about what's a different perspective, whether it be the perspective of a water or whether it's the perspective of another user. Thinking about how I'm going to make the other person feel in this, in what I create.
That's awesome. And I got to ask this. So you start talking about this. I mean, you talk about the water cycles and stuff like that. Can you share a couple of the other unique type ones that you're seeing, or the types of things that they're doing? I mean, what types of stuff are they doing? What are they making?
It could range from creative art. I had one of my favorite projects is a scratcher who brought in still shots from Childish Gambino's This Is America, put in those screenshots of those visuals and then animated them throughout with the music. And I just loved it because they spent so much work in getting the timing right and essentially choreographed a dance in Scratch. And so it's incredible work that they do. And so sometimes art could be that entry point for coding. And it could be, I love art, and now I see the value of coding and how it can enhance my art. It can enhance my design. I see, of course, all our great games. We have some professional gamers, professional game developers who come to Scratch community and build out their games that they want to do, and part of that is they can use other languages. They can use like more. They can use another language, another platform to create their game. But they come back and then they create that game on in Scratch, so they can share with others. Others can play it, and they see the value of the coding editor. And so, in that case, Scratch is, in many cases, Scratch is not just the introductory language to computer science, but in that way, it pushes even game developers to think about the power of sharing with others and building with others as well. And so a lot of that leads to is being for young people to develop fluency through exploration and experience. So I can make something, but I can also develop my skills in trying a little bit out as I go, sharing that with others. Getting feedback is not easy. And so getting feedback and incorporating into your project is another skill set as well. And so that's a lot of the project. Like I could go on. Obviously, I get really excited about the projects that I see on the online community.
That's cool. I appreciate you sharing, because that's the neat. That's so neat, because what you're talking about. Because just a note, and hopefully this doesn't make a lot of computer art people angry, but you don't think about a lot of people would not think that artsy person is going to fit with a technology computer person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's cool. You just described a whole bunch of different ways they fit together. So I love that. And, so one of the things I got to ask you is, how can educators encourage creative learning, especially creative coding, in their classroom? And I mean, how can they take this into their classroom?
Yeah, so they can implement easy to use tools such as our tutorials and classroom support resources, such as Scratch. Scratch Junior is also a product for younger ages. And so it kind of is identifying what they're looking to do. They can explore ways to combine their own images, words, and sounds into online projects. Students can expand their ability to give voice to those ideas. And so perhaps it's I want to connect with my art teacher. I want to connect with my music teacher and some of the stuff that they're doing there, do some recordings, capture some videos, and then bring them in to the work. So it's relevant. It's exciting way to kind of think of that new medium as a form of expression. And so we have also give Scratch educator meetups are opportunities for educators to come together in an online space or in person and share their ideas, build their own agenda, get support, and do things alongside others. And so that's what I encourage, I think, educators the most. It's really it's difficult to do things on your own, and it kind of sucks when you're doing something just but you're the only one doing it there. And so I encourage educators to find someone else at your school who you want to work with, someone you want to collaborate with, someone you want to learn with. Maybe they're not an educator, but someone that you can laugh with. A lot of I love it. I think one of my favorite signals that things are going well is when students start making jokes about code. I hear sometimes students say, "Oh, I'm stuck in a forever loop," and it's just like, that's funny, because you wouldn't, if you knew what a forever loop was, then you'd crack up. So we're using now we're developing that fluency of a language as a form of expression that is no longer just about coding, but I can give you a joke and make you laugh based off of that. That's really awesome. And so I think seeing computing as not just a concept, but as a fluency, I think is what I urge a lot of educators to think about.
That's very cool. One of the things that you need that environment in which kids are encouraged to expand and try, just like you were talking about with the skateboard. Hey, there's some stairs with a railing over there. I think I'm going to have to try that. And how tall is that rooftop?
Exactly. I actually wanted to be an architect initially growing up, and part of that is so I can create skate parks inside places throughout the community and build that in. And in a way, I kind of feel like I am sometimes. I'm an architect in this online community and creating playgrounds for Scratchers, young people to come and play and be creative and learn with others. So in a way, I feel like that's how I kind of sometimes see it.
That's cool. I can see it. I definitely see how it works, because that's it's an awesome thing, because a lot of times, and especially like you were talking about, with the being connected with others and so forth, and being able to share, people who might be thinking, even if they're not thinking in the same direction you are, the power of that coming together, which goes beyond. It's just that encouragement needed, and so it helps in bringing these opportunities to all people, to all young people, to everyone. Can you talk a little bit about encouraging, just wherever you are as a teacher, as an educator, about introducing this to kids who may not have had access before or something like this?
Yeah, and I think part of that first step is we have, like, media is just everywhere. And so it's really easy to consume media. And I think part of that change is how do we then become creators of that media? So shifting that power from consumers to creators is that piece, and is that first step. I think what comes along with that is also the form of self-expression and collaboration, which we talked about, and sharing in a safe space online, in the Scratch Online community, interacting, collaborating with others. But I think that equity and computational fluency they refer to is that we feel that all young people should have access to computational fluency and we see it as a literacy, right? If there's benefits to developing your literacy skills, your form of expression, identifying perhaps what that emotion is and expressing it to others. And I think it's that same way with fluency, especially with so much digital projects. And so it's not just a learning about computing concepts, but it's also about how do those concepts connect to other parts of my own life, of my own interest with others. And so and so you may not become a professional skateboarder, but you maybe have a great idea for a brand, and you're gonna have to create an online space and for that. And so it's valuing computing and being able to talk to a developer and being able to share what your ideas are, whether it be a website, whether it be an app that you're looking to make, or a digital experience. And so I think for educators, I think that's means teaching empathy, and this idea that anyone can learn to code, but not everyone can express themselves through code. And so you can do a step-by-step program, like you said, and then create a project. But that project, what part of you is in that project, I think, is what's more challenging. And so how did you express yourself through that code, and how will other people feel when they see the projects you create? And so a step-by-step tutorial where my project looks the same at the end may not do that, right? And so I love our tutorials, because the tutorials, they get you started with just enough so you can turn it into something your own, and so make it your own. And at the end of the tutorial, it shouldn't look that same way. And a perfect example is the Scratch Cat. The Scratch Cat has no name because we want you to delete the Scratch Cat and add your own image under there. And so there's so many awesome ways in which the Scratch team has really thought about how we can create more opportunities for students to be creative in their work.
That's so awesome. Because in the late 70s, 80s, I had this best friend who, he was brilliant. He was creative, and I like to think I'm creative and so forth, but I was not on the level of him. To give you an idea, he went on to become a mechanical engineer and did all kinds of stuff with that stuff. But he was tinkering around with an ATV from those days. All right, they're a lot different than the ones today. And he was trying to put a reverse on it. All right, he was trying to make it go in reverse, and which he kind of learned that you tend to end up on the ground a lot when you do that. But he was tinkering around with also taking Legos and making a walker from the Star Wars universe. And today, Lego makes all those things. But it was cool because he was experimenting, and everything he created always would fall over. But the point is that, after a while, when your friend's doing all this stuff and you're going, dude, you are so far above what I'm thinking about. I'm over here. Wasn't that a funny Three Stooges show? And he's over here doing all this stuff. I got to come back to that community thing, because that's got to be so helpful to kids and to adults to be able to share in that. What does that actually look like? Is it like you go online and you chit chat with each other, or is it actually a Zoom feature, or is it a share your work type thing? What's that look like?
Yeah. And so the value of community and being able to share with others is that you can make projects with your own voice, but get ideas of what someone else has made, be inspired, and find others who have share similar interests, and then collectively either build off those ideas or share those your project with others who are also interested perhaps in dressing up cats or skateboarding, for example, right? When you share your project online, others can give comments and give feedback on how to improve your project. And so if I were to create my project and not share it with others, I wouldn't know what someone else did or what the user encountered. And so getting that user feedback is extremely important. I think it's just not for coders. That's for any field, like authors and makers throughout the world, and engineers and artists. Getting feedback on that work is extremely is important. It's what builds us, is what pushes us to become better and learn as ourselves. And so that's what the value of community and building alongside with others can have. And in my work in the past, I've seen Scratchers where they're in one room and they have they don't have access, or they're sharing projects within that room, and so those ideas are kind of confined within that room. Perhaps they're bringing in ideas of something, a video or something else they saw, but they're not sharing their work. And then I've seen other places where they're using the online community and remixing other ideas. And so getting someone else's project and applying it and adapting to your own is really difficult, right? There's one thing about perhaps like creating your own car and designing it from just raw material to being a mechanic and identifying a problem and perhaps combining different parts of cars. Those are really difficult things to do. Being able to reuse someone else's ideas and code. And so sometimes Scratcher's not saying like, oh, I just borrowed that piece of code, but it's also, I borrowed perhaps a code or an idea or something or a feeling that this project had, and I'm giving him a shout out. I'm giving him a reference. And so just the same way that we cite our work when we're writing a paper, we can also do that through coding. We can also cite and give shout outs to others on work that we built on.
That's so cool. Can you tell me what the ages of kids are? That, I mean, do you have certain ages in which you have to start, or I mean, what's your target audience right there?
Yeah, the target audience for Scratch Junior is 5 to 7 year olds, and then for Scratch is 8 and up. And so we see it used in nice. Computer science, first year computer science courses in at universities or undergraduate programs. And so it's used, you can use that different way, but also that those creative learning experiences. So maybe we're not using a digital device. Maybe we're using bottle caps, or we're using other blocks. We can still explore the concepts of creative learning. And so it can start at a very younger age, before 5. I always love how the Media Lab in LKZ says from K to gray.
Nice.
It's like that sweet spot.
That's cool. That's awesome. So how does a teacher, educator, student, family, how do they get started with Scratch? How do they get, where's this, what do they do?
Yeah, you can, Scratch Online Editor is free. You can download the app, the Scratch Junior app as well. You can go to scratch.mit.edu and click the create button and get started. You don't even need an account to begin creating your project. If you want to save your project, you can, but you're not going to break anything. Go in there and try out a tutorial. Start having fun. Being playful is another element of the online community. I always like to encourage folks to search for projects that they like. So I love orcas, and so search orcas and see what others are doing around orcas. And so play around, and by playing I mean experience what others have created, build on those ideas and iterate them. So that's encourage that. Also sign up for our newsletter. And so you can keep informed on when Scratch Day and Scratch Conference is coming up. Our YouTube channel houses a lot of awesome videos, how-to videos, which are different than tutorials. Tutorials will walk you through a how-to video, may help you get unstuck or realize, oh, how did this person negotiate this challenge? We also have our Scratch Conference, which includes about 12 different sessions on what Scratch in practice looks like, as well as moving from Scratch from a tool to a philosophy. So that's also a great place. And then last piece is probably Scratch Educator Meetups. These are groups throughout the world where you can meet other educators and just come through, ask questions, study something that you want to learn more about, or help someone else out.
That is so cool. And I gotta say this, it sounds like, cause you keep using the term Scratcher. And so I gotta know if that's that sounds like a title that they all want to make sure they share. So, that's just kind of cool. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just really meant for young people who are on the Scratch online community. I think part of that it's not just young people. Sometimes it could mean different ages and different experiences. And so, it can mean, and so sometimes Scratcher is our term that we used for that.
That's nice, because I could see I could earn some instant credibility if I start talking about scratch this and scratch that.
Definitely.
How do you know that, man? Good stuff. So, all right. So, Francisco, we're getting ready to close, and before we do that, could you let everyone know where they could connect and learn more?
Yeah. Going to scratch.mit.edu. If you want to learn more about our foundation, scratchfoundation.org. We are our own 501c3, and so that's a great place to learn about the organization itself, our team members, and what we're working on. You can also learn about the conference there and a lot of our work. And so, yes, there's going to be a lot of changes, a lot of work that we're doing the next year. And so those are scratchfoundation.org is probably the best place to kind of see where all of that breaks out.
Very cool. Well, I'll put that information in the show notes so it's easy for people to find and pull it up on their mobile phones right there. They just go click that link, and they're at the website. So good stuff. So I got two last questions I like to ask my guests, Francisco. And the first one goes like this. When so much is going on that you become overwhelmed, what stops you from quitting?
That's a great question. My family in Mexico City, my family, they're new friends and family of the world, but I think specifically, there was a large, and there's still a large like maker movement and kind of that movement of creating and exploring through doing. And my grandpa, who I referenced earlier, had a factory of making furniture in Industria Mexicana Mueblera, and to me, he was just the first kind of creator, the first maker in my life, where I realized like, oh, you can make this incredible kitchen from just raw aluminum, and just that my grandpa's just love for music, I think kind of is really kind of stuck on me, his passion. My grandma, who was the owner of it and signed all the paperwork, and so seeing that there's different dimensions to running a business and making things, and so I think my grandparents, and I think it just always just remind me to keep going, to try it out in a different way, to stop banging my head against the wall and realize how I can perhaps move that wall, or how that wall's not necessary. And I think that they really, stopped me from, I wouldn't just say just quitting, but from keep on having fun in playing and iterating.
I love that. That's awesome. That's cool stuff. That is so powerful. Just thank you so much. The last question for you, Francisco. Do you have a teacher in your past who made a difference in your life? If so, who was it, and what would you say if given the chance to say thank you?
Elementary school teachers have always were really influential. High school teachers really influential. I think a pivot point in my career, or just as a person, would be Maricela Marquez, who from Santa Barbara, and when she saw me give that presentation on the science and physics behind hip hop music, her just asking me, where did this come from? Why are you doing this? Like, this is incredible. Do you want to do more? Do you know there's a whole field of educators? I think helping me even realize, you're a mentor. Do you know what that means? Do you know like the power of getting something, like deconstructing it and then reconstructing with your own? I just have to give her a shout out for just pushing me to ask questions about the world, and I think just to make sense, to begin to make sense of the world through it like a different lens. And so I give her a shout out for that. She's doing amazing work at Santa Barbara, not only within the school. She also worked as on the board of a community center. So I think blending those of like teaching and learning doesn't just happen in schools. It happens elsewhere. It happens in community centers. It happens at home. That goes beyond that. And I think I just give her a shout out for that.
So cool. Thank you so much. Francisco, this has been awesome talking with you. I mean, coding is awesome. And I just love this focus on creativity. Scratchfoundation.org, doing Scratch and Scratch Junior, and being a scratcher would be something very cool to be able to say, hey, I'm a scratcher, man. I like that. So Good stuff. Wishing you the very best in all you do.
Likewise, scratch on.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching Learning Leading K12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching Learning Leading K12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.